Time next for Perspective, and our guest today is Lindsey Nefesh-Clarke, founder and managing partner of W4. It's Europe's first crowdfunding platform dedicated to girls and women's empowerment. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us here on France 24. First off, what exactly does W4 aim to do?
Well, as our name indicates, Women's World Wide Web, we're focusing on Sustainable Development Goal 5B. So that's harnessing technologies for girls and women's empowerment around the world in both developing and developed countries. As you may be aware, we're in a world where we have a digital divide that risks becoming a digital chasm, and we have a digital gender divide. So our work is really to promote girls and women's equal access to and participation in information and communication technologies. A lot of our programs focus on providing girls and women with IT training, IT skills training, ranging from basic IT training right the way through to specialist advanced IT training, because of course the future is digital.
But don't you think that technology and the internet has helped bridge the divide between men and women?
Actually, the statistics say otherwise. If you look, for example, at the International Telecommunication Union's facts and figures reports, you're going to see that this digital gender divide is actually widening. And if we're really focusing on the opportunity. I think today, in our day and age, girls and women's empowerment is arguably one of the most important megatrends of our time. It's one of the highest yield investments for sustainable development, for socio-economic progress, and ICTs, information and communication technologies, can be an extremely powerful catalyst to promote girls and women's empowerment and gender equality, and to enable girls and women also to reap the digital dividends of our increasingly digitalized societies and economies.
So how does it work? Because it is a crowdfunding site. So, I mean, can anyone go ahead and launch a project?
Absolutely. So can anyone launch a project? Not anybody can launch a project. Obviously, we have to do very thorough due diligence.
You have to approve.
Yes, of course we do. But the whole beauty of crowdfunding is that anybody can support a project, and in our digital age, everyone can be a change maker, as the saying goes. So that's individuals, that's also corporates, to come together and to fund projects around the world. A lot of our projects are actually in places where we're operating in extremely difficult circumstances, maybe highly challenging security situation. Tribal zones of Pakistan, DRC. We actually have programs around the world. So
do you also implement?
Yes, we absolutely do. We also implement programs.
Because I was looking at your website, and you were right. You do have projects from from Kenya to Lebanon to Afghanistan.
Absolutely.
And what I was surprised about is some of the projects get overfunded. Does that happen often?
It does actually happen quite often, I'm glad to say. But there's such a dire need to fund access to skills training. And that's not just on the other side of the world. I mean, as you may be aware, we're also facing a digital gender divide right here in Europe. There's a costly lack of girls and women with digital skills. And we're facing in the future a shortfall of skilled ICT professionals that could cost the EU economy billions of euros. So, of course, a radiantly obvious solution would be get more girls and women into ICT.
Like, we know what countries like Afghanistan and Kenya need to do in terms of bridging the gender divide. What about developed countries like here in France?
As you say, if you take a continent like Africa, it's a very sobering fact that I think on average it's no more than 18% of women have access to the internet. So that's a very telling statistic. In Europe, for example, I think on average it's about 30% of women represent or make up the ICT professionals in Europe. It's predominantly a man's world. I mean, we had examples on your program this morning, and we seriously need to do something about that because of the costs. And it's not just in terms of boosting the EU economy, but it's the fact that we have decades now of incontestable evidence of how girls and women's empowerment, girls and women's equal participation in the economy, and that includes in the digital economy, can drive wider socio-economic progress. And it impacts everything from GDP to environmental sustainability, right the way through to ensuring national security and global stability.
And where do you see, W4 going forward?
We're actually involved now in the Global Coalition Equals. It was founded about 3 years ago, so it's fairly recent, but I think they're really out to move the needle on this crucial issue that affects us everywhere. It's really a global issue, so we're involved in that at one level in terms of really trying to push the policy. In Europe, I think it's going in the right direction, say, for example, under Maria Gabriel, who now has a Women in Digital scoreboard, and obviously 27 nations have signed up to this declaration to precisely be promoting more girls and women in ICT studies and careers and entrepreneurship. So we're involved there, but also very much at the grassroots level, because we cannot afford to leave girls and women behind in the digital revolution.
Because, speaking about, projects that are being implemented on the ground, is that, an area you'd look to focus on more to get more projects developed to really go about making change at the grassroots level?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's it's a well-known fact that when it comes to funding of gender equality, first of all, there's a lack of funding, and then secondly, it's very hard to get it to the grassroots level.
Because I was surprised that some of the projects on your website, it was like $2,000. It was, and there's some obviously that have a lot more funding required. So is that often the case?
Yeah, I mean, it can range from, as you say, 2,000 right the way through to, 200,000. It depends on the project. But the point we're trying to make is that today, and I come back to this, I think it's one of the greatest investments we can make. And that's not just me, of course, that's now known. And increasingly governments are aware of this and fortunately are doing something about it. But we're trying to say that actually everyone can be part of this movement that is fortunately a growing global movement. So, you may not be able to fund a year's IT training for a young woman in DR Congo, but you could definitely fund a part of that. And that's actually where crowdfunding comes in, because it enables everybody to get involved.
Indeed, from all parts of the world.
Absolutely.
We're going to have to leave it there. Lindsey
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Lovely
on the program
to be here.
Time to get you a reminder of our top stories here on Live from Paris. Donald Trump lifts sanctions on Turkey after Ankara complies with a ceasefire in northeastern Syria. Critics of Trump's decision to withdraw U.S. troops, meanwhile, say the president is now being outplayed in the region by Russia. And Spain gets set to exhume the remains of Francisco Franco. The former dictator's remains will be transferred from a mausoleum to a discreet grave outside the capital, Madrid.